Tom Bower, the legendary royal author, is sharpening his quill for a new edition of his book set to reveal huge secrets inside Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's marriage.
There are so many telltale signs that something is clearly wrong with Meghan. And I don't mean it in a bad way, but I mean, how can you get your age so wrong? Did you know that in 1997, when she met Yasmin Bleeth, when she claims that she was working for Humphrey Yogurt, age 13, she also, or somebody with the name Meghan Markle, filled out a questionnaire for Sears, the company, claiming that she was 21 years of age.
But what they need to do is face up to the blackmail that's coming from California and in some way or other undermine Harry's and Meghan's credibility.
She's absolutely ruthless.
This is Meghan's first trip to the snow. Dad took her up to Big Bear.
I think the palace and the machinery of the monarchy needs to take Harry and Meghan more seriously and make sure that Harry and Meghan's antics don't impact the future.
She's stuck because she was an actress who became a real princess, who wants to be an actress again, but has to continue to pretend to be a real princess.
The question no one in the royal circle wants to answer is suddenly impossible to ignore. 4 years, Meghan Markle has presented a carefully constructed story about her life. But now, veteran investigator Tom Bower is challenging one of its most basic facts. And this time, the evidence isn't rumor. It's documented. Before anyone dismisses this as just another royal rumor, you have to understand exactly who is asking the question, and why people inside the royal world are taking it seriously.
So I choose people who don't want to be written about on the whole, whose lives are shrouded in mystery, and they want to hide their secrets, and I just love digging away to find out what they don't want to.
Tom Bower is not a gossip columnist. He is the kind of investigator who spends years pulling apart public personas, cross-checking records, and speaking to people who were there long before the cameras arrived. When Tom Bower focuses on someone, it's usually because he believes there is something that doesn't add up. And this time, that someone is Meghan Markle. In his 2022 book Revenge, Meghan, Harry and the War Between the Windsors, Tom Bower didn't just criticize Meghan Markle, he dissected her timeline. Not her opinions, not her interviews, but the actual sequence of her life. Childhood, education, early career, and the years before she met Prince Harry. And according to his research, there are gaps. Gaps that shouldn't exist if the official story is accurate. Now, publicly, Meghan Markle has always maintained the same birth date, August 4, 1981. It's consistent across interviews, profiles, and official biographies. On the surface, everything appears aligned. But Tom Bower didn't rely on surface-level information. He went deeper, into archives, into records, into places most people never bother to check.
Today felt like the perfect day to address a theory that many people out there have been speculating on, that Meghan Markle has lied about her age. Is she actually older?
And what he found is where the story begins to shift. One of the earliest inconsistencies appears in a 1997 magazine feature, an issue of 17 magazine that listed Meghan Markle as 21 years old. Not 15, not 16, 21. That's not a small mistake. That's a difference of years. Years that would completely change the timeline of her early life. So the question becomes unavoidable. Was it an editorial error? Or was it information provided at the time? That's where Tom Bower does what he always does. He verifies. He checks publication dates. He confirms authenticity. And according to his findings, the issue is real, the record is real, and the discrepancy is real. So now there are only two possibilities. Either a national publication made a significant error about a relatively unknown teenager, or the age attached to Meghan Markle at that time was different from what is claimed today. And that's just the beginning. Because when you follow Tom Bower's investigation forward, more inconsistencies start appearing. Not in rumors, but in patterns. Patterns in timelines, patterns in career progression, patterns in how events line up. And the deeper he goes, the more one question keeps resurfacing. Why does the timeline feel adjusted? Take Hollywood, for example. In the entertainment industry, age is not just a number, it's currency. It determines what roles you can audition for, how casting directors perceive you, and how long you remain competitive. Meghan Markle was building her career in that exact environment, trying to secure roles, trying to stay relevant, trying to move forward in a system that quietly filters people out based on age brackets. Now place that into context. If the official birth year is accurate, her early career struggles follow one path. But if the timeline shifts, even slightly, it tells a very different story. A story where the pressure to appear younger isn't just understandable, it becomes strategic. And this is where Tom Bower's argument starts gaining weight, not because of a single document, but because of accumulation. One discrepancy can be dismissed. Two can be questioned. But when multiple elements begin to point in the same direction, it becomes harder to ignore. Even more interesting is how consistent the public narrative has remained over the years. Meghan Markle has repeated the same details, the same milestones, the same version of events. That level of consistency would normally reinforce credibility. But according to Tom Bower, consistency can also indicate something else: careful construction. Because real timelines are messy. They shift, they overlap, they don't always align perfectly. But constructed timelines, those tend to be cleaner, smoother, easier to present. And that's exactly what makes this situation so difficult to dismiss. Because Tom Bower isn't asking people to believe a theory. He's asking them to look at documented inconsistencies and decide for themselves. He's not presenting a single explosive claim, he's laying out a sequence of questions. Questions about dates. Questions about records. Questions about whether the publicly accepted version of Meghan Markle's early life actually reflects reality. And once those questions are introduced, they don't go away. They expand. Because if something as basic as a birth year becomes uncertain, it naturally leads to a larger concern. What else might not align? Not speculation, just logic. If one piece of the timeline feels unstable, every connected piece comes under quiet scrutiny. Which is why this isn't just about age. It's about credibility. It's about whether the foundation of a public identity is exactly what it appears to be, or something more carefully managed behind the scenes. And as Tom Bower continues to stand by his findings, and as those findings continue to circulate, the pressure doesn't come from headlines, it comes from the unanswered gaps. Because in the end, this isn't being driven by accusations. It's being driven by something far more difficult to silence. A timeline that refuses to stay consistent. Once you move beyond that first inconsistency, the investigation doesn't slow down, it accelerates. Because what Tom Bower uncovered next doesn't just question a single date. It begins to challenge the entire timeline surrounding Meghan Markle's early life. Let's go step by step. After identifying the 1997 magazine discrepancy, Tom Bower didn't stop there. He moved into another area where facts are usually far more stable: professional records. Specifically, databases connected to acting careers. And this is where another detail raised eyebrows. Early versions of Meghan Markle's industry profile reportedly listed a different birth year, 1977 instead of 1981. Now again, this is not a small shift. That's a 4-year difference. And in Hollywood terms, 4 years can completely change how someone is cast, how they are marketed, and how long they remain viable for certain roles. So the question becomes, why would a professional profile, used for casting and industry credibility, display a different birth year than the one publicly maintained? Was it an error, a placeholder, or something adjusted over time? Because here's what makes this more complex. Unlike interviews or media profiles, industry databases are often updated directly or through representation. They are part of a working system. And if that system once reflected a different age, it suggests that at some point, a different timeline existed, at least within professional circles. And this is exactly how Tom Bower builds his case. Not with one dramatic claim, but with a sequence of smaller, harder to dismiss inconsistencies. Then comes the university timeline. Meghan Markle attended Northwestern University, graduating in 2003. On paper, the timeline works. If she was born in 1981, she would have been around 22 at graduation. That's completely standard. But according to Tom Bower, when he began speaking to people connected to that period, classmates, individuals in alumni circles, people who appeared in the same group photos, a different pattern started to emerge. Many of those individuals are now in their early to mid-50s, not early 40s. Now, that alone doesn't prove anything. Universities have students of different ages. But what caught attention was consistency. Multiple individuals from the same social circles, the same photos, the same academic period, all aligning within a similar age range. An age range that doesn't match the publicly stated timeline of Meghan Markle. So now the question evolves again. Was she significantly younger than the people she spent most of her time with? Or was she closer in age than officially stated? Because socially, people tend to cluster within similar age groups, especially during university years. It's not a rule, but it's a pattern. And when patterns repeat, investigators notice. And this is where Tom Bauer introduces something even more difficult to dismiss: first-hand accounts. According to individuals he spoke with, people who requested anonymity, there was an understanding, even back then, that Meghan Markle might have been older than she claimed. Not publicly stated, not widely discussed, but known. Quietly. Now, whether that's accurate or not is something viewers have to decide for themselves. But from an investigative standpoint, it adds another layer. Because now the narrative isn't just about documents, it's about memory. About people who were present during that time, offering a perspective that doesn't fully align with the official version. And when documented inconsistencies begin to overlap with personal accounts, the situation becomes harder to categorize as coincidence. Then there's the issue of academic records themselves. Tom Bauer also examined claims related to Meghan Markle's degree, often described as a double major in theater and international relations. But according to some findings referenced in his investigation, that exact academic structure doesn't align cleanly with how programs were officially categorized at Northwestern University at the time. Again, not definitive proof of anything, but another detail that doesn't sit perfectly in place. And by now, you can see the pattern forming. It's not about one claim. It's about accumulation. A magazine discrepancy. A professional profile variation. University timelines that raise questions. Accounts from people who were there. Academic descriptions that don't fully match institutional records. Each piece on its own can be explained away. But together, they begin to form something else entirely. A narrative that feels adjusted. And this is where the pressure quietly builds. Because Tom Bauer doesn't need to state a conclusion directly. He doesn't need to declare a definitive alternative. Instead, he presents a series of inconsistencies and allows one central question to linger. If everything is accurate, why do so many elements refuse to align perfectly? And for Meghan Markle, that question becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Not because of headlines, not because of critics, but because the discussion has shifted from opinion to documentation, from speculation to pattern recognition. And once a pattern is visible, it changes how everything else is viewed. Because now, every timeline detail, every early career milestone, every personal claim, is no longer taken at face value. It's examined, measured, compared. And that's what makes this stage of the story so critical. Because what started as a single discrepancy is no longer isolated. It's part of a growing framework, one that suggests the official timeline of Meghan Markle may not be as straightforward as it appears. And if that framework continues to hold, then what comes next isn't just questioning a date. It's questioning the entire foundation of the story itself. By the time the investigation reaches this point, it's no longer just about scattered inconsistencies. It starts to touch something much more sensitive. Family accounts, personal history, and the kind of details that are usually impossible to fake over time. And this is where Tom Bauer shifts his focus again, toward the people who knew Meghan Markle long before the world did. Because documents can raise questions. But family can complicate them. One of the most unusual moments in Tom Bauer's research comes from his interaction with Thomas Markle. Now, this is someone who has spoken publicly many times, about childhood memories, about upbringing, about personal moments that most people would never share on record. He has been open, detailed, and often emotional when discussing Meghan Markle. But when it came to one very simple question, what year was she born, something changed. According to Tom Bauer, instead of giving a direct answer, Thomas Markle hesitated. And then, rather than confirming 1981, he reportedly responded in a way that raised more questions than it answered, "Check the records yourself." Now think about that for a moment. A father, when asked about his daughter's birth year, doesn't confirm it directly. Not clearly. Not confidently. Instead, he redirects. Is that unusual? For most people, yes. Because birth years are not complicated details. They're fixed. They don't shift. They don't require verification. And yet, in this case, the response wasn't certainty, it was distance. And that alone doesn't prove anything. But in an investigation built on patterns, it becomes another piece that doesn't quite fit. Then there's Samantha Markle. According to the public narrative, there is a significant age gap between Meghan Markle and her half-sister, roughly 17 years. That would mean Samantha Markle was already well into her teenage years when Meghan Markle was born. But in conversations referenced by Tom Bauer, Samantha Markle describes something different. She suggests that the gap felt much smaller, that they were closer in age than people assume. Close enough to interact more like siblings who grew up alongside each other, not separated by nearly 2 decades. Now again, memory can be subjective. But when that memory directly challenges a widely accepted timeline, it introduces doubt. Because if the age gap were truly that large, it would shape the relationship in a very specific way. And yet, the way it's described doesn't fully match that expectation. So now, once again, the timeline is under pressure. And this is where Tom Bauer's method becomes clear. He doesn't rely on one type of evidence. He layers it. Documents, records, professional data, and now, family testimony. Each element reinforcing the same central concern. The official version doesn't align cleanly across all sources. Then the focus shifts back to career. Because timelines don't just exist in personal history. They show up in professional progression. And when Meghan Markle's early acting career is placed under that lens, another pattern begins to emerge. In the early 2000s, she was auditioning. Small roles, background appearances, commercial work. The typical path of someone trying to break into Hollywood. Nothing unusual there. But according to Tom Bauer, the pace and nature of that progression raises questions when placed against the official timeline. Because in Hollywood, there are unspoken thresholds. Age brackets that determine opportunity. If you're in your early 20s, you're considered emerging talent. If you're moving into your 30s without major success, the industry begins to narrow your options. Now consider this. Meghan Markle didn't land her breakthrough role in Suits until 2011. According to the official timeline, she would have been around 30. That's already on the edge of where many actors secure defining roles. But if the timeline shifts, even slightly, if she were older than stated, then that breakthrough doesn't just look delayed, it looks improbable. Because casting decisions are not random. They are calculated. And age is one of the factors that quietly influences those decisions. Which brings the investigation back to motive. Because this is where everything begins to connect. If there were inconsistencies in early records, if professional profiles reflected different details, if social circles suggest a different age range, if career progression aligns more closely with an adjusted timeline, then the question is no longer just, is there a discrepancy? The question becomes, why would there be one? And in an industry like Hollywood, the answer isn't difficult to imagine. Perception is everything. Age determines opportunity, and maintaining a specific narrative can directly impact career survival. Now, none of this confirms anything definitively, and Tom Bauer himself stops short of declaring a single, fixed alternative. But what he does present is something arguably more powerful, a framework where multiple elements point in the same direction. A direction that suggests the timeline of Meghan Markle may have been adjusted over time. And by now, the story has evolved. It's no longer just about records. It's about consistency across every layer: family, education, career, public narrative. And when those layers don't align perfectly, the gap between perception and reality becomes impossible to ignore. Because at this stage, the question isn't just whether something is wrong. It's how many things have to feel slightly off before people start looking for a completely different answer. By now, the investigation is no longer circling around possibilities. It begins to press against something far more serious. Official records, legal implications, and the kind of decisions that suggest intent rather than coincidence. Because when Tom Bauer moves into this phase, he isn't just asking what doesn't align. He's asking why certain things were changed. And this is where one of the most discussed moments emerges. In May 2019, when Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was born, his birth certificate was filed in the standard way. It included the mother's full legal name, Rachel Meghan Markle. Clear, traceable, consistent with official documentation. But then something unusual happened. Weeks later, that record was amended. The name Rachel Meghan Markle was removed and replaced with a royal title, Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex. Now, on the surface, that might seem like a formality, a stylistic update. But according to Tom Bauer's investigation, this type of change is extremely rare, especially after a document has already been formally recorded. And that raises a quiet but important question. Why remove a legal name from an official record? Because legal names are not decorative. They are functional. They allow documents to be traced, cross-referenced, verified against other records, passports, educational transcripts, employment histories. When a legal name appears consistently across documents, it creates a clear paper trail. But when that name is altered, the trail becomes harder to follow. And this is where Tom Bauer introduces a theory, not as a conclusion, but as a possibility. That removing Rachel Meghan Markle from such a visible record may not have been about formality at all, but about distance. Distance from documents that could be linked, compared, and examined. Because if earlier records exist, records that might contain different details, then a clean, consistent identity becomes much more difficult to maintain. Now, whether that theory is accurate is something each viewer has to decide. But in the context of everything that has already been uncovered, magazine discrepancies, professional profile variations, university questions, family accounts, it doesn't stand alone. It fits into a growing pattern. And that pattern is what gives this stage of the story its weight. Because now the conversation is no longer just about public perception. It begins to edge into legal territory. If personal details, like age, were ever misrepresented on official documents, contracts, or records, the implications are no longer reputational. They become legal. And according to discussions referenced in Tom Bauer's work, even the possibility of inaccurate information on formal documentation could raise serious questions. Not guaranteed consequences, but potential ones. And that alone changes the stakes. Because now, silence is no longer just a personal choice, it becomes part of the narrative. When Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the War Between the Windsors was released, the reaction from those close to Meghan Markle was immediate. Legal teams reportedly responded quickly, challenging claims, pushing back against allegations, attempting to control the spread of the story. But here's where it becomes interesting. Despite the response behind the scenes, there was no clear, direct public clarification addressing the central issue. No definitive document released. No single statement that closed the gap between accusation and certainty. And in situations like this, absence can speak as loudly as presence. Because when questions reach a certain level, when they involve documents, timelines, and verifiable records, the simplest way to resolve them is transparency. A single piece of evidence. A single confirmation that aligns everything. But that hasn't happened. And according to Tom Bauer, that silence isn't accidental. It's strategic. Because addressing one inconsistency could potentially expose others. And in a situation where multiple elements are already under scrutiny, opening that door becomes risky. So instead, the situation remains unresolved. And unresolved questions tend to grow. They attract attention. They invite investigation. They encourage others to look closer, to revisit earlier details, to connect pieces that may not have been connected before. Which is exactly what has started happening. Because now, this is no longer just one author's perspective. It's a topic being discussed, analyzed, revisited across different platforms. Not always with the same conclusions, but with the same underlying question. Why doesn't everything align? And for Meghan Markle, that question becomes increasingly difficult to contain. Because public narratives rely on consistency. And once that consistency is challenged, not emotionally, but structurally, it becomes harder to restore. At this stage, The story is no longer about proving a single claim. It's about the accumulation of doubt. Doubt created not by speculation, but by patterns that don't fully resolve. And as Tom Bauer continues to stand by his findings, and as more people begin to revisit the same details he examined, the pressure shifts again. Away from headlines, away from opinion, and directly toward something far more difficult to control: the record itself. Because records don't rely on narrative. They either align, or they don't. And this is where the story reaches its most uncomfortable point, because by now, it's no longer just about inconsistencies in records or timelines. It becomes about what those inconsistencies could mean if they are ever fully confirmed. Because Tom Bauer doesn't end his investigation with a dramatic accusation. He does something far more calculated. He lays everything out: documents, patterns, testimonies, and then steps back, allowing one final question to take center stage. If even part of this is true, what are the consequences? Because at this level, we're no longer talking about public image. We're talking about legal identity. And if fundamental details, like age, were ever presented inaccurately in official settings, that doesn't just raise eyebrows, it raises legal questions. According to discussions referenced in Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the war between the Windsors, even the possibility of incorrect personal information on formal documents could have wider implications. Contracts, agreements, official filings. Each one relies on accurate identification. And if that accuracy is ever challenged, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads. Because think about how many areas depend on consistency. Marriage records, business deals, media contracts, even royal documentation connected to Prince Harry and the broader institution. None of these operate in isolation. They connect. They reference. They build on each other. So if one element becomes unstable, everything linked to it begins to face quiet scrutiny. Now, that doesn't mean consequences are guaranteed, but it does mean the risk exists. And in situations like this, risk alone is enough to change behavior, because it explains something that has stood out from the beginning. Silence. Despite the scale of the discussion, despite the circulation of these claims, despite the level of detail presented by Tom Bauer, there has been no single, definitive moment where everything is addressed and resolved publicly by Meghan Markle. No document released that closes the timeline completely. No statement that directly dismantles every inconsistency. No clear point where the story ends. And according to the framework presented by Tom Bauer, that absence isn't random. Because if the timeline were completely solid, the simplest response would be clarity. Instead, what remains is ambiguity. And ambiguity creates space. Space for interpretation. Space for investigation. Space for questions that don't go away. Because here's what makes this situation different from every other controversy surrounding Meghan Markle. This isn't built on opinion. It's built on alignment, or the lack of it. Documents that don't quite match. Timelines that feel adjusted. Accounts that don't fully agree. And once people begin to notice that pattern, it changes how everything else is viewed. Because credibility isn't lost all at once. It shifts gradually, one inconsistency at a time. Until eventually, the question is no longer, is this true? It becomes, how much of this is true? And that's the point where narratives start to unravel. Because at the end of his investigation, Tom Bauer doesn't claim to have every answer. He doesn't present a single alternative timeline and demand it be accepted. Instead, he leaves the audience with something far more powerful. A framework of evidence that forces a reconsideration of what has been taken for granted. A reminder that public identities are not always as simple as they appear. And that sometimes, the most revealing detail is the one that doesn't quite fit. So the question remains. Is Meghan Markle really the age that has been publicly presented for years? Or is there another version of the timeline that has yet to be fully acknowledged? Because until that question is answered clearly, with evidence that aligns across every record, every account, every stage of her life, the speculation doesn't end. It evolves. And as more people revisit the same documents, the same timelines, the same unanswered gaps highlighted by Tom Bauer, one thing becomes increasingly certain. This story isn't closing anytime soon. If anything, it's just beginning to unfold. And if you want deeper evidence-based breakdowns like this, stories that go beyond headlines and into the details others overlook, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the next investigation might not just question a timeline, it might redefine the entire narrative.